Welcome to the Autonomic Healing Podcast. I'm Tom Pels.
And I'm Ruth Lawrenson. We'll be unpacking what it looks like to activate your brain to holistically manage stress and trauma that bring healing to the mind, body, and spirit.
Being free to live authentically as humans.
Thank you for joining us. Let's get this conversation started. Hey, Tom.
Hey, Ruth.
It's going to be a good conversation, I think. We wanted to talk, again, more about rational intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
In the last episode, we actually talked about my poem that I wrote, this beautiful offering, but really as a way of communicating contentment. And that is the first stage of rational intimacy, contentment. But we want to move along a little bit, because actually when you're in that space of contentment and you're in rational intimacy, the second space that you enter, and maybe you could put better language to it than me, but the second space you enter is this place of grace. And I just want to explore that word, what that means, because that might mean a lot of different things to different people. And then obviously the benefits of being in a place of grace. I know you want to talk about my life in this conversation, because I think I feel like I have journeyed this a little bit, and I'm seeing some of that happen for me right now in my life, the areas of grace, and you call it gifting.
Yes.
So lots there, but let's start. Like, where do you want to kick us off? Grace. What is grace?
Grace is a word that means gift or gifting and poise. Mm-hmm. Someone evidences grace in their deportment. They're in a conversation and they are not losing their minds. Mm-hmm. They have a sense of equanimity, of self-possession, of poise. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things, one of the meanings of the word grace. And another is gift. So if we give a gift to someone or we express our gifting, we're sharing something that's creative, that contributes, that builds up, that edifies, that contributes. Mm-hmm. So why does grace mean both a sense of poise as well as gift or gifting is because to be present in the relationship, in the interaction, in the moment with poise means you're contributing something. Mm-hmm. And what you're contributing is your gifting. Bear in mind that in the first stage of rational intimacy, there is contentment. But that doesn't mean there isn't any stress and need, because no stress and need is dead. The only time we have no sense of stress or need is if we're simply not alive.
Not alive.
To be alive is to experience stress, change. Mm-hmm. To experience life is to have need.
And then that contentment is, I think, the contentment is to appreciate all aspects of life and all of the balancing of those joys, those sorrows, it's all of it, isn't it? That's what we talked about last time.
Yes.
Is that when you can stop running away from all of the things that you think are awful in life or failures in life, when you can actually embrace them, hold them together, there is a contentment.
Yes.
Which is why you can be content and actually things aren't working out for you, like on the face of it, not everything is happening in your area. You're not getting that job promotion. Maybe your relationship's not brilliant or whatever it is, but you can still be content because your view of life is to hold all of it together and be content.
It's that sense of satisfaction.
Mm-hmm. And so we're in that. So off that's kind of like the foundation, right? And then off the back of that, what can be built from contentment is this area where grace, our poise, and then our giftings can really thrive. So let's just talk about that for a minute, because I'm curious, because I think we all have, as human beings, this desire to contribute.
Absolutely.
Like, it's huge, isn't it?
It's human to be creative, to contribute, to be a part of.
So that's a really deeply centered human desire to contribute. I'm curious about whether for a lot of people their experience is a frustration around that. Mm-hmm. So can we talk, is that tsunami of stress?
That's the tsunami of stress, because with the tsunami of stress, the first stage is stress and need. But what the stress and need triggers in the tsunami of stress is distress and discontent. Which doesn't mean we don't react and we don't do. It's just that we sense stress and need as a threat to well-being, and we try to avoid or flee. And being unable to flee or avoid, then we want to control. We want to engage the threat, manage the threat. And that's where the distress and discontent comes in, because we feel and sense ourselves as powerless to do anything about it.
So
that's in the tsunami.
Yeah, so the difference there is, in the tsunami we've got distress, discontent, but in rational intimacy we've got poise.
Yes.
Okay, same situations can be happening. The whirlwind of stress and things not working out for us and all the rest of it can be happening. But in one paradigm, the effect of it, we are not happy campers. We are distressed. We're discontent. There is not much likelihood that our gifts are going to flourish when we're in that state. But in rational intimacy, we have grace, which is this, which I think the poise comes first, doesn't it? Is that right?
Yes.
But you have this kind of sense of poise and once you can have the grace, then the grace gifts can flourish.
It's the perception of the stress and need. In the tsunami of stress, we sense or perceive the stress and need as a negative. It's something bad. It's something unwanted. We sense it as a threat to well-being. That could be a situation in life. It could be an interaction with another person. It could be a relationship with ourselves. But we sense the stress and need as a threat to well-being. Stress and need just is. And there is no such thing as no stress and no need. So stress and need are always there. It's how it's perceived.
Which is why perceptions are so crucial.
Yes. We sense it, the stress and need, because of past experiences.
Yeah.
We perceive it as a threat to well-being because of past experiences and what we've learned, or what we know, or what we think. But the very same stress and need in the rational intimacy, because of contentment, we don't perceive it as a threat. It's just stress and need.
It just is, yeah.
And stress and need are being alive.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? There's no such thing as being alive without stress and need. So it's the way we perceive that. And if we perceive it with a sense of contentment, a sense of satisfaction, as an opportunity, as opposed to a threat to well-being, that sets the stage for how do I engage that stress? How do I connect with that need? How do I go about meeting that need? Yeah. What does the stress inherently communicate? Change. Opportunity. What?
Well, I just think it's amazing how you can, with one perception you can see stress as a threat, and one perception you can see stress as an opportunity. And it's how, that's all the difference. That is where you see, and I think for me, Tom, you know, learning about this and learning about the tsunami of stress and feeling like I've been in it for a long time, and then learning to kind of at least recognize it happening, and then learning to kind of live in a different way, which is what we call rational intimacy. I think in terms of my gifting, I think I felt that frustration for such a long time. You know, I think the way I would describe it is that I feel like I've got so much I could do. There's so much I could contribute, and yet it's super limited. Like I can't get there. Like I can't, no matter, you know, I could blame it on circumstances and all the rest of it, but it's actually these kind of perceptions where I'm actually seeing stress as a threat. And so that immediately, it's like it cuts off the supply of my giftings. And it's not to say that there is no contribution or there's no giftings, but it's severely limited. That's what I would describe the difference.
And it's not satisfying. You can contribute, you can do, you can support, you can whatever. You can engage. You can work. But it's not satisfying.
Yeah.
And because the sense is this isn't making any difference and it's not going to make any difference, that's where the distress and discontent is. And
I think, you know, so one of the things that we've talked about a few times now, which I feel a little bit spoiled by, but we've talked about my poetry, and like this has been something that's completely new.
Yeah.
Like it's just kind of come left field at me. And the reason I bring it up is because, you know, like I've got a number of different giftings, I would say. You know, I'm a communicator. I've been speaking and teaching for a long, long time. I'm a natural leader. So I've often set up initiatives and I love doing that. And but this poetry thing is like, it's something that I kind of didn't see myself as, number one.
No.
And then also, secondly, I think, I don't know, it's just like, it's just never been on my radar. However, it is this area, and this is why I'm bringing it up. I think it's an area where, you know, maybe 6 months ago I started writing poetry. The thought just popped into my head, maybe I should write a poem. And so I did, and I really enjoyed it. And I felt like, I can do this. And it just came very naturally to me. But the reason, it's like my favourite thing to do. And I think the reason, this is a super long-winded way of saying this, but I think the reason is that I feel like I can be fully me doing it. There's like, in some ways, even with all of the other things, I'm learning still to be fully me in them. Because I've had the restraints of the tsunami of stress. I've had the, you know, even with like speaking or preaching, there's always a filter of, well, I shouldn't probably say that because, you know, because maybe that would be misconstrued, or maybe, so I feel like I'm learning.
Self-expression.
Yes. I'm learning to be more me in those areas. But because this poetry is so new, it's like this kind of fresh start. So I haven't got the baggage of the rest of life, and I've entered into it, and it's like a space where I can be me, and it feels so liberating to do that and have a creative expression in that. So I don't know, that's why I wanted to bring that up,
and that's very satisfying. So our native capabilities, our inherent gifts, can find expression when there is a sense of contentment that can allow the expression of the grace and gifting. Whereas trying to do those things, for example, in the expressing yourself, it was constrained.
And I think
I can say this, I can't say that. I should say this, I shouldn't say that. These are things I could say and they'll get a really reinforced, and these I should never touch because no, you shouldn't. And with rational intimacy, that self-expression can find expression.
Yeah, I think that
without all the baggage, without all of the yes, no, maybe, better not.
And it's being liberated from those perceptions as well that were in the tsunami. So I think, for me as a communicator, find it like, it's like I'm trying to, weirdly enough, find my voice. Because I wonder how much, because I had this perception of love me tender, which is so about people pleasing. It's like, I need to make sure, like, I mean, goodness me, I would never want to say something that someone could potentially be misunderstand, and then what would happen, and blah, blah, blah. So that whole...
Like, that's even avoidable anyway.
Exactly. But now, so to be able to be rid of that and to go, you know what, I can't control all of that, but I can find my voice and I can read well and I can think and I can process and I can figure out what I really believe and I can put that out there and know that not everyone will agree with that, and that's okay, and that there's a conversation. And so I think that there's that liberty to be me, unapologetically me, that I see in my giftings that's come through.
And it hasn't just found expression that way with poetry. You're also in a master's program, leadership, but sustainable and sustainability. And there's writing.
Yeah. There's a lot of writing.
Yes. 4,000 word essays on...
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And doing brilliantly at it. And you'd gotten your... What's the degree that you gotten in the UK? Like a bachelor's equivalent?
Bachelor's honours,
Yeah.
History.
Yes. And you'd studied history. You got a bachelor's degree. Like I got a bachelor's degree and it was in vocal performance and choral conducting. Okay. But then I went on. But that wasn't a path or a vision that you'd seen for yourself.
Yeah, I think that there is something about the advocacy of yourself when you kind of realize tsunami and you realize perceptions. You're like, oh, okay, there's another way. That I think that there's this sense of, well, why haven't I done this? Like, why haven't I? I love academia. I love studying. I love writing. I'm quite good at it. I wasn't sure whether I was going to be good at it when I took my master's. I was a little unsure that first assignment.
I think the phrase that you used more than once was "out of my depth," but you weren't at all out of your depth.
But I think that
You're finding a deeper person.
Yes, finding me, and it's just really interesting. I think. And it's so fascinating to me because I think a lot of the things that I find myself doing now, when I look back to my childhood, there were the seeds of them there. I can see the same gifting there, but somewhere along the line, tsunami of stress, like chaos of life, stress and trauma, a lot of them got suppressed.
Yes.
And maybe some of them were flourishing a little bit, but a lot of them got suppressed. And so what I'm finding is like the cover's been taken off. And it doesn't feel like it feels very familiar because I think they are things that have always been in me, but haven't had the chance to be expressed, Yes. And so that's the place I find myself in, is expressing those gifts and not particularly really not spending much energy worrying about what other people think.
No, because it's not about people pleasing. It's about being loving to yourself and others. And just recently, there was a big multinational city gathering here in Denver, and your world expanded. Because we went to the Women's Empowerment and Economic Forum, and share a little bit about when you stepped into that room. And this is a totally different world than the world you'd seen yourself and been a part of. And this was all about leaders across various organizations, and but it was all about the place that women as human beings can inhabit and contribute the same way any other human being, and how that it's necessary to nurture and cultivate and encourage that equality. That it's about being human beings, not a gender.
Yeah.
And I commented earlier, a little while ago in our conversation, before we started recording the conversation, that the difference between a male and a female at a genetic level is 0.1%. We are 99.9 plus % human.
The same.
Yeah.
And yet, we
don't think of it that way. We think of that inverted.
But there's so much of the 0.1% has, I mean, when I think about the impact.
Determined and dictated people's perceptions and opportunities then. And this is about humans being human. And all of us together as humans contributing to the well-being of ourselves as humans and the space that we get to live in, or we make unlivable.
Yeah, and I think for me, I mean, there was
when you stepped into that room.
When I stepped into that room, I was, it's just a very kind of governmental, professional environment. And so, I'm from a church my leadership is from a church background. And, but so my initial feeling was like, I literally stepped into that room and I thought, oh crap, I don't belong.
Yeah.
Like I felt really intimidated, but it was only for a few seconds. And I felt like, ooh, how do I don't fit here. Like, I'm not, I guess I was thinking, this is a different world that I don't understand. Maybe I'm not intelligent enough for it. I don't know enough. I don't know. All of those little doubts came through. And then I kind of wrestled a little bit and I just thought, no, this is cool. And this is like really interesting to observe. So I felt like a little bit of an observer, which I probably was during the most of the thing. But actually, so many different layers, Tom, went on for me during that session. But so it was interesting to reflect on that feeling of stepping into the room and feeling like inadequate. But then also, as I sat there, it reminded me of some of my early years as a kind of young adult. So, when I was 17, I think it was 17, I went to the World Debating Championships in New Zealand and represented Wales as the Welsh team. And I was like, hang on a minute. I remember, this feels really familiar to those types of situations. And I used to do this. I used to speak in areas that were, there were governmental debates or public speaking or just in those spaces of, that weren't so religious. And then basically in my early adulthood, I stepped into much more of a kind of sheltered, religious setting to use my leadership gifts. And that was, some great stuff in there, some not so great stuff in there. But overall, I kind of started feeling like I don't belong. But then I thought, no, this is interesting, and I could suddenly start seeing myself in that place. I felt like I could actually use a lot of my gifts in this space.
Yeah, it's what you're getting a master's degree in.
Yeah,
literally. What had happened is because of the tsunami of stress, the context you were living in just kept shrinking.
That's what it felt like. Yeah.
Smaller and smaller. narrower and narrower because of a lack of homeostasis.
Yeah.
Homeostasis is life.
Mm-hmm.
It's a sense of optimum function, of capacity. And with AHA and reestablishing homeostasis and a way to cultivate that and nurture, your world grows and grows and grows and expands and gets broader and broader. And you see not limitations and restrictions, but opportunities for self-expression and gifting.
Absolutely. And it was really interesting, actually, because it wasn't just the experience of going to that, the content that they were talking about. They were talking about women's opportunities of empowerment in like Latin American cultures, and some of the obstacles, some of the challenges. So, someone was saying that actually, they was describing the different cultures between men and women and all the rest of it. And as someone who is British, who now lives in America, I'm white. In terms on the face of it, I've got some good as a woman compared to a lot of other women around the world. Yes. I have got less challenges ahead of me. When I think about that, I think, oh my gosh, I haven't got those cultural barriers or whatever it is. And so, but I still thought, I found myself thinking back through my life and thinking, I've still somehow carried a poverty mentality in some of, I haven't spoken up when I should have spoken up. I haven't seized certain opportunities when they've presented themselves. Well, why is that? I was thinking through my own level of empowerment. Yes. Why haven't I grown? Why have I stayed small? And I was thinking about that as they were describing women's experiences are more around the world. And so I think that idea, Tom, of you saying, actually it's a small world. Why do we put up with that? When it can be a big world. And what I'm experiencing right now is that, my world is expanding and I'm like, heck yeah, I'm going to go for everything that I want to do. And I think that was for me down to stress and trauma, down to not dealing with those things. And it's remarkable when you think about the impact of stress and trauma. I mean, I'm obviously applying it to women here, but this could be applied anywhere.
Oh,
but the impact of stress and trauma keeps you down. It can keep you right down. I was saying to you, a really good idea for my dissertation that will be coming up on my MBA would be, how the importance of dealing with stress and trauma as we try and empower women around the world. Because if we don't get to that issue, you can give them all the opportunities, but sometimes it's very difficult to access stuff.
Because they wouldn't engage. They wouldn't see themselves as, oh, this applies to me.
And I think I've done that in my own life. I've seen that. I've seen myself do it.
Yep.
And I'm like, why would I do that? But yeah, I get why I would do that.
Because the core issues in the tsunami of stress begin with a sense of insecurity and inadequacy. That's world shrinking. And then we feel powerless to do anything about it. And that inadequacy and insecurity, coupled with powerlessness, it becomes a control issue, and I don't have it, and everything and everyone else does. And then it damages our self-image and our self-esteem. As opposed to in rational intimacy, where there is homeostasis, where life is restored and is optimized, and the way we exist as human beings can facilitate that, and it's supposed to, and is a natural function, that then we feel secure and capable. And when you stepped into that room, it shifted for a moment into insecure and inadequate, but no, secure and capable. And then you felt empowered.
And then not only did I feel empowered and suddenly like, oh no, I can sit here and I can observe and I can learn. But then as I was sat there, I began to start thinking of all the possibilities, which is part of it, right?
Which transitions then from being empowered into being influential. And it's not an issue of who has control and who doesn't. And I know I don't. It's how can I be influential? And that's what you were describing. I could be influential this way. I could be influential that way. And it's influential because of being empowered. And then that influential space and how you can contribute out of that nurtures self-image and self-esteem that is rational, that is realistic, that is growing.
Yeah. Love it.
And the gifting, that second stage in rational intimacy, is the key that transitions instead of distress and discontent. The gifting and that self-expression, because you're empowered, is what allows things to grow from there.
Yeah. And I think that the level of security as well is,
Absolutely.
when you're not living in a space where you're constantly feeling insecure.
And inadequate.
Which, honestly, when I think back, that was like...
That was the norm.
It is the norm for a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people don't say it, but they go home and deep down inside, that's what they're feeling like.
Yep.
But the environment... It's a hostile environment for gifts to grow. And so I think as we deal with stress and trauma through autonomic healing activation, and then also understand our perceptions, and we begin to learn to love ourselves and others well, healthily, sober-minded, like you say. It's not like we're not more amazing than we are, and we're not terrible either. No. But there's a soberness to who we are. That brings a steadiness, a security of that allows that gifting to flourish too.
Yep. Yeah. Then we can be authentically who we are, as the person we are, as the human being we are, and then we contribute.
Absolutely. And it's been really wonderful for me. I think one of the things that's just been, this last year has been wild for me. So much change and so many new things and so many new friends and people. And I'm about to jump on a plane in a couple of days' time, go to the UK and with Women Speakers Collective and help a group of people in the UK to empower women there. So I would never have dreamt that I would be doing this time last year, And that's just one thing, like you say, there's all sorts of different things that are coming out from my life right now. So, but I think that it's not random. It's not just like luck. It's not just, it's come out of a lot of work actually on my part.
Oh, yes.
It really has, it's been a heck of a lot of work on my part
and
to dealing
with a lot of truth.
Yeah.
That previously was not, but yeah, why not?
Yeah. Doing a lot of that deep work of allowing healing to happen, and then embracing homeostasis, which can help me. Have that poise when stress and trauma is there, because it's there. This last weekend, I feel like, oh my gosh, like I'm in the middle of stress and trauma again. But instead of going into those patterns where we're in discontent, there is that sense of, okay, poise. And out of that place, you can continue to see your gifting happen. So it's an amazing part to me, is this isn't just like theory, it's lived out in my life.
From a more scholarly article expressing what we've just been talking about, George Billman on homeostasis said this: as emphasized by Cannon, Walter Cannon, who coined the term homeostasis, as emphasized by Cannon, homeostasis is not static. It is rather a dynamic, self-adjusting system that maintains viability in the face of changing environmental demands. Echoing Bernard, homeostasis is a unique property of living organisms and may be responsible for life itself. More recently, Turner described homeostasis as a dynamic disequilibrium. We often will experience disequilibrium as unsettling. We like status quo. We like familiar. We like consistent, predictable. But more recently, Turner described homeostasis as a dynamic disequilibrium. Dynamic, as a stable internal environment requires continuous monitoring and adjustments, once again, a self-regulatory process, in order to maintain a balance between opposing forces. What he calls disequilibrium, so that a free and independent life is possible.
That's lovely.
He went further and stated that, properly understood, homeostasis is life's fundamental property, what distinguishes it from non-life. In short, homeostasis is life. And the reason lacking homeostasis that life seems dead is because of that. We aren't being who we are.
I think that's really interesting, especially in terms of what we do in autonomic healing activation, because often, I mean, we've talked about this before, but often I think in terms of therapy or medicine or all of, like, we have a problem and we just want a solution, right? We want we want the equilibrium, right? Yeah. We want just it to stop and to be static and for it to stay. But that is not what happens in autonomic healing activation.
No.
What we're actually taught how to manage disequilibrium, right? How to allow our bodies to do the little tweaks so that we stay in homeostasis. And I think that is really important, Tom, in terms of people understanding what AHA is.
Yes.
And unfortunately, we have a culture that is looking for a magic bullet, and it isn't a magic bullet, but it is a way. It's a way in which you've discovered how we can activate our brains to tweak the balance, basically. And so whilst when people come for that initial session for you, they do experience a remarkable amount of normalization in their bodies, and we've seen that happen in all sorts of areas for people. But what you teach them after that is how to do it continually, because stress and need doesn't go away. And actually, there is the design
shouldn't.
And the design is that we're not going to get equilibrium. We need to activate that homeostasis so that we're tweaking. You know, we're balancing day by day. Would you say that's right?
That's being alive. That's being alive. To wish for no stress, no need, is to wish to be not alive. That is such an essential paradigm shift.
Yeah, it is.
But we do.
Yeah.
We don't want stress. We don't want need. And yet, to not want stress and need is to want non-life.
And so, as we wrap this conversation up, I think it's important for our listeners to know that this is part of rational intimacy. This is part of moving from the world of the tsunami of stress, where your perceptions of stress and trauma are so overwhelming sometimes that it sends you into these places of discontent, insecurity, all of those things. But actually, there's a moving into another paradigm to live, where not only the foundation really is that contentment, which means, you know, it's not everything's all right, but you're content. And then off the back of that, a space where you can be fully you in your giftings. Your world doesn't have to remain small.
No.
It can and it will, as we approach rational intimacy, expand so that you get to be you, fully you, unlimited you.
Yes, because what determines well-being isn't external. It's internal.
That's so true.
When internal determines well-being, the external will be impactful, but not determinative of well-being.
Yeah.
And actually can be engaged with to promote well-being even more.
Yeah. And then you get to contribute.
Yep.
Get to contribute to a world.
Express your gifts and engage with poise.
Love it.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get back together in a couple of weeks' time for our next conversation. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Appreciate talking about grace.
And to all the listeners, thank you for listening.
Yeah. Love you guys.
You've been listening to the Autonomic Healing Podcast.
Join us next time as we continue in our conversations with Tom. If you're interested in pursuing your own autonomic healing journey and want to find a practitioner, visit our website, innerworkings.org. See you at the next episode.